I only have to talk about a few symbols. The symbols I'm going to be talking about are the symbols related to the fire being a cleansing symbol. And after this, there's only one video left, and it's probably literally going to be 5 minutes long. The first symbol I'm gonna talk about is the Young Uns. Okay, here it is. I'm a bit tired. I'm a bit tired of doing this series. The first one isn't necessarily proof, but it's just something interesting about them. They're scared of sin, and if you watch the other videos, because this is in a playlist where I talk about the other symbols I proved, and the link is in the description. And overall, I'm just proving that the book can be read from a religious perspective, if you please. And so, for the first one in this, is more related to the overall religious theme, and that's that the young ones, if they're civilians, are afraid of sin, and the book seems to be, to me, I feel like you can read it as a commentary on how we go to war and excuse and use the fear of the people we're fighting being bad. What's also interesting and does not necessarily prove anything is that Ralph blames them for there not being any huts, even though the big ones aren't helping either. Throughout the book, they are disrespected. Like, Ralph even calls them not even people. Jack says, like, he says something about, like, serves you right if you get caught up by the beast or something like that. And if the young ones are just your average civilians, it's interesting to wonder how that relates. Because Ralph, as I proved in the last video, I believe, is a politician. Or maybe I'm proving it in this video. I don't know, but he's a politician. So, wonder what that says about our society. Oh, I wrote exactly what I think it says about our society under, but yeah, people are often like blamed for things by politicians. What's also interesting is that the young ones show the most fear, even though they really have no say in what happens because of it. They do most of the fretting about the situations, which is obviously interesting because, for example, in war, like the civilians, well, the politicians would rile up the civilians and tell them why we need to go to war. And obviously, the civilians would be more concerned if the politicians kind of know they made the reasons up. Okay, that was it. I guess I didn't have any proof. I guess my only proof is that they're kind of treated like common citizens. Like, they can vote and they can speak up and therefore influence decisions, but not a single young one actually makes decisions. If one of them becomes kind of an authoritative figure, they're labeled a big one. So I guess that's like my only proof, but I feel like it makes sense for the young ones to be civilians, right? Like, the authorities are making rules that apply to the young ones. That's who is being enforced on the most, because there was the most of them. I totally forgot to write a place proving that Ralph is an authority, but I'm gonna do it in my next video because I'm only talking about the middle ones there as a whole, and I will have already gone over the individual middle and figures, so might as well. Next, I'm talking about how the blood symbolizes guilt, dirtiness. It's like not even really relevant, but I just think it's really interesting. Similarly to the Lord of the Flies being Beelzebub, that thing I talked about. I talked about it in my last video, so you can check it out in the playlist if you want, but it's not really necessary if you're just coming for the specific symbols I talk about here. Okay, so I lost the footage for the fire equals cleansing thing. So yeah, and kind of freestyling because I don't have like the in-depth notes I made. So yeah, but so I was explaining how like okay, I was explaining how the little ones like are civilians, and that's connected to like the fact that the fire is cleansing because I like really don't remember anything I was talking about. So, but I will persevere. Oh, because okay, so the fire is cleansing, right? And like cleansing as in getting rid of the part of the island that the humans have touched, right? Like I'm pretty sure whenever it like destroys anything. Okay, so in the beginning when it's on fire, the island, it's over the scar. It's over human infestation. And remember, over the scar is where nothing good happens. So, yeah, that's the first time it burns. And at this point, I really can't remember how I explained this, but at this point, it's kind of, it has kind of cleansed part of the island, but it hasn't gotten rid of enough. It's described as intellectually daring to bring the fire over into the civilized country. Seems to suggest that the author thinks that ordered societies need as much saving as unordered ones. So, anyways, the young ones the young ones connect to this because the political figures like don't actually care about them. I mean, the biggest like example is just the fact that Jack, um, right, he has them guard the mountain, talking about like, I'll kill the beast for you. We need pig and stuff. He presents himself as a figure that's protecting them, but then at one point when they're worrying about the beast, he's like, forget about the beast. He only talks about the beast when he can use it to manipulate. Even Ralph, like, I explained this in another video how he's not holier than thou, but um even he kind of forgets about rescue and fire and is kind of just talking to talk at a lot of points. Blood equals guilt. So the first thing that made me be like, blood is not a positive symbol, which you might be like, duh. But if it was a religious connotation, then you think blood would be more positive, right? Because don't they at church like sip like a bit of wine to symbolize the blood of Christ? You'd think the blood would have more of a positive reading, but it really doesn't. My first proof is that I think it was after Ralph found out that the fire had gone out when his ship had passed. The first he was thinking of the worst word he could think of, and he thought of bloody, which I know like when you're British that's considered like not like a curse word, but it's kind of like stupid where I don't know, I'm not British, but I don't think like children say it, like really young children. I mean, not all of them, because like some children are allowed to say you're lying or like you're stupid, but like it's one of those things where sometimes like children are not allowed to say it. That's my impression of the word bloody. So I guess I could see why he would think he would kind of like treat it as a curse word in this situation. But it's just weird because there are worse curse words. And yeah, maybe none of them were coming to mind, but he does say asmart. So, but anyways, I really see. And so, my main proof, really, besides that, is that the blood just shows up in negative situations. Like, for example, if it symbolized just like the blood of Christ, maybe it would be present in scenes where Simon's there or he's thought of something, he's had a premonition and predicted the future. Because I went over this in my last video, but Simon predicts the future accurately. So, or if Piggy like says something, but it's just there really anytime something negative happens from what I saw and wrote down. For example, in that scene ish is that in that chapter where Ralph is running up to the mountain to confirm that the fire had gone out. It specifically said he was covered in blood, which was interesting because the word blood is very selectively used. Even when Piggy dies, it doesn't say anything about blood. It says red, I think, but I don't think it says anything about blood. It's used in like very specific situations, I feel like. Like it'll be mentioned when they're hunting pigs, but it wasn't mentioned in the killing of Simon, I don't believe. Which those are negative circumstances, but they have different symbols. They're like they specifically symbolize the ridding of intelligence, the ridding of purity. But I feel like this specifically shows up when they're actually like guilty about something deep down. Okay, so I was talking about how I cut this out, but I was talking about how I showed how blood connects to or I was talking about an example I showed about blood and how it shows up when someone's guilty, but no, I didn't say that, but I said I did, so I'll just explain it. But basically, I lost my Jack is the spreader of sin footage right, but it's interesting because when he was messing around and let the fire go out, he was like down there by where the ship would be, like he was by the ocean. Symbolically speaking, either he literally just didn't want to be saved, or because of temptation, he has completely strayed away from even thinking about being saved. Okay, so as I said, blood shows up very specifically. Even when Piggy's hit in the head and dies, it does not talk about blood. It does not say blood specifically, I think. And so Ralph is running up to see if the fire went out and there's blood on him. Symbolically speaking, he feels a little dirty for possibly not caring enough to really think about the fire. Do have them. That's exciting. On page 59, Piggy says you and your blood to yell at Jack for putting Pig above fire. And again, it's directly connected to the fire, right? Blood is in opposition to the fire. It's showing up when Ralph knows that the fire has gone out and stopped them from being saved. It's showing up when Jack is too focused on blood to. And just to make this really clear, oh my god. Okay, just to make this really clear, if the fire is obviously like at least positive some of the time, like I think it's positive all the time, but at least some of the time it's positive because it literally is salvation for them. Like it's what they expect to save them, and it does. But then the blood keeps showing up in opposition to the fire. That makes it a negative symbol. I'm not bawling my eyes out, I promise. Again, it shows up very specifically. Like even if someone's being injured, it doesn't always specifically say blood. And they talk about how much blood there was with the pig. There's a drop of blood on page 120 as Jack hunts. He rubs blood on his hands from killing on Maurice's face, which I think I went into this, I hope. But Maurice is also, he's a middle one, and all those figures are interesting. And you'll see why that scene is important in a second. Blood shows up anytime they're feeling like um, anything negative, really. Or there would just be general guilt. Another situation is like the next page when it's talking about Jack hunting. He's like disgusted by the blood, even though at one point Piggy says, "You and your blood," to chastise Jack for hunting. When I read the book in high school, I actually really confused Ralph and Jack. Like, I got the names really confused. I really was confused. And I confused Roger and Robert for too long this second time around. But, anyways, yeah. Even though I'm pretty sure it's depicted as sending them into a type of frenzy at some point, the blood. And at the least, Piggy says, "You and your blood," implying that Jack is obsessed with blood. And he likes hunting right. He likes killing pigs, but he doesn't like the blood. He didn't mind taking the guts out of the pig, but he looks at the blood on his hands with disgust and like wipes them on his legs. I don't know if he's wearing pants. And if the blood is not just guilt or dirtiness, but also just general effects of sin, like guilt and dirtiness, then obviously Jack is obsessed with the effects of sin. He's obsessed with killing pigs, which is a sinful activity, as I talked about in the last video. There's like many places where the blood shows up after something negative, but I didn't write them all down. But another place where Ralph sees or someone sees blood is when he finds out that a lot of people had went to join Jack after he had run away, after no one wanted to vote him chief the second time. There's blood in the sand. I feel like the civilized area is kind of like regarded as good by most people except maybe Simon and Piggy. Unconsciously more so. So yeah. Now that even like the big guns, the people not related to Jack have joined him, maybe it's shining light on how the civilized area was never good and is dirty and contaminated. And then on page 118, apparently I wrote down that the hunters are excited by blood. Let's have a look. Let's have a look-see. I write down the wrong pages sometimes, so who knows if that is true or false. Oh no, just as I'm reading this, I'm reminded I really did not do all of the symbols. Like, there are so many symbols. I feel like almost everything is a symbol. Like, light and dark is clearly a symbol. Even the butterflies are a symbol. I'm pretty sure we might have dissected that. They were at least like mentioned in my English class. Like, almost, there's so many symbols. I couldn't get to all of them. This isn't related, but I just keep thinking every time I read this passage where Simon is dehydrated and starts hallucinating and sees the Lord of the Flies. It just reminds me of the Buddha who fasted. Like, I don't know. I was looking into it and there's like so many different stories. But in my philosophy class, I learned that basically he was confused as to why rich and poor people suffered. And so he decided to sit down and meditate for like no breaks until he found the answer. And yeah, Simon keeps sitting and sitting even though he's really thirsty. And then he doesn't get up until the Lord of the Flies speaks to him. And interestingly enough, oh my gosh, obviously the Buddha is like, let's not look at that. Obviously the Buddha is a Jesus figure, right? And he's sitting and he's trying to figure out why there's suffering no matter whether you're rich or poor. And Simon is kind of sitting in the same way, fasting in a sense, wondering why, assumably, because right, the author doesn't tell us, he shows us, wondering why things are no go. And the Lord of the Fly says, I'm the reason why things are no go. So that has like, I guess it does prove that Simon's kind of this like holy figure, but it's just, I'm mostly just adding it because it's really interesting. Also, when I was looking for a clip that is missing from this video, I found the fire equals cleansing video. So, but I'm also not going to re-edit this. So, I mean, okay. I'll cut out some of the parts that are like overbearingly like gone into, because if you watch the fire equals cleansing video, you don't want to essentially watch it twice, right? But I'll still keep like summaries just in case someone 1 out of 2 of the people watching this didn't watch the fire equals cleansing video. But let's just give a round of applause to me because I found the clip that I lost for a second for the end of this video, and I found the fire clip. So, what was I saying? Next symbol, Maurice, and then after that it's just Roger. So I feel like Maurice is kind of Christ-like in the sense that he carries everyone's guilt. Simon is more Christ-like in the sense that he kind of knows things. I mean, they all know something, but he doesn't know. He knows aspects of their nature, but it's more related to sin and what will happen in relation to sin in the future. Maurice is more related to the actual effects of sin, I feel like, and guilt or whatever the blood symbolizes. Because, I mean, the reason why I kind of placed guilt on him, I think I placed guilt on him, and then I realized maybe blood is like dirtiness, guilt, something like that, is because Maurice feels guilty after kicking down the little one's sandcastles. I mean, Roger, I think it is. I think it's Roger. It might have been Robert. I will not lie. And I'll probably be checking once I get to the Roger section. But he felt guilty too, but he still watched and stuff. But Maurice specifically, like, fled away. And it specifically said that it was civilization. Or it said that for Roger too, but he specifically fled away. He seemed the most guilty. He seems to carry the most guilt. And at one point, Jack wipes the blood from his hands on Maurice. The aftermath onto Maurice. Interesting. What's also interesting is I'm pretty sure in some of the dances where they're just pretending to hunt people, I mean, I think it's mostly Robert that will be in the middle, but I think Maurice, like, gets in the middle too sometimes. The next one I have to talk about, or the next one I have left, is Robert. Or not Robert. I mean Roger, but I kept confusing them. I saw him as, like, just your average sinner. Just like how Maurice is maybe the average person who recognizes guilt and that things are bad, but isn't moved on their own to act on it, and doesn't necessarily get caught up in sin, kind of like Simon. And Simon is like your average Christ figure who is really insightful and good. I feel like Robert is kind of like your average something too, or Roger, sinner. Yeah, what's interesting is that when Robert talks about how Jack is gonna beat a kid and no one knows why, it says he received this news as an illumination. That sentence in of its own seems to suggest that he's discovered something about his character, right? He something has been brought to light about because of that news. I mean, wait, who else was like, there was another passage I just had in my head and forgot where, oh yeah, Sam and Eric say they feel like they've seen Simon. It's not Simon, Ralph for the first time. So I guess like it can be noted, but not necessarily proof. Yeah, he thinks about the possibility that Jack is irresponsible. Irresponsible. It's interesting because this seems to suggest that Roger isn't like a knowingly sinful figure like Jack. He's just someone who sins and gets caught up really in his environment. Yeah, he seems to have more insight than Robert here, who's giggling about it, and Roger interrupts to be like, "Did the chief say why this is happening?" You know, I feel like the middle ones just tend to be slightly more insightful. I feel like Ralph and Piggy are the only ones that like ask questions like that. But when they do it, it's usually seen as a rationale. When I feel like when the middle ones do it, especially with Simon, it's more like a premonition. That's kind of how it's written. Like a genuine question versus a rhetorical one, basically. Yeah, so Robert, or yeah, Roger is like, Jack's gonna take us hunting, and then he's wiggling his tooth as he's looking at the top of a mountain. And then it says the unspoken subject has changed. So it's kind of like with Simon frowning down at the huts, like, what are they thinking? Because when Roger wiggles his tooth, I'm thinking it's either an adult or a baby tooth. If it's a baby tooth and he's wiggling it while he's looking somberly somewhere, maybe he's wanting to be a baby, like actually be a child and not have to worry about all this. Seems that he's missing civilization if he's thinking of that as soon as someone mentions hunting. If it's an adult tooth, I'm thinking he's kind of feeling not good about being caught up in this still, because he's actually recognizing what it's doing to him, such as chipping away at his teeth. Also interesting, that's brought up right after hunting. Interesting that he's looking at a mountain, which this mountain in general is considered a negative entity. I don't know. A lot of people say the island can be described as a character in of its own. So nothing good happens over the scar. I've been saying that. So it's interesting that Roger is looking at a mountain as he's thinking about the effects of all of this. And that whole page seems to show that he's not like Jack, like he's not fully caught up in this. I think when the sailor comes in at the end, he starts crying. But what I noticed is it never said anything about Jack crying. It mentioned like the young uns all started crying. I think it mentioned some other figures by name. Jack doesn't cry, but Roger seems to be not liking this so much. Hence why I feel like he's an average sinner. He's definitely like an authority at the end, because some of the age categories get changed. He's definitely in also the middle ones have some authority, but he's an authority at the end, but he's not fully in it like some of the others. He's showing some self-awareness, unlike Jack. And Ralph, who is completely unaware that he's just being authoritative just to be authoritative, which I'm getting into that in the next video, because Ralph is an interesting one. Piggy, who says some smart things, but is not getting the assignment. He doesn't consciously know the subtext, he just says it, if that makes sense. And yeah, my proof for him being a sinful figure is the fact he's always murdering. With that pig with the like little piglets, it specifically only talks about him jabbing and stabbing the pig. Maybe it talks about Jack, but no one else. And obviously, Roger sharpened the sticks on both ends for the pig, the Lord of the Flies, and he also did it for Ralph. So obviously not good, so that's why he has a negative connotation. And he's throwing the rocks at those children. I don't know, let me double check to make sure it's not Robert. Okay, yeah, found the passage. Maurice really feels bad. And yeah, it was Roger doing that. Where did I put my picture? Okay, yeah, that's it for Roger. And the next one, I'm just gonna go over how, like, more proof that in general the middle ones are people who know things, and are reminiscent, and just more self-reflective, really, and actually sit with the realizations they've come to more so than the other. And I'm also going to talk about Ralph because I totally forgot to talk about him, I'm pretty sure. And there's a lot to say about him. Obviously, politicians tie into war, so it's more so about the general theme and not really about fire or Jack. Yeah, the playlist will be in the description box if you want to watch it. If not, that's okay.